Why is Babylon mentioned from the beginning to the end of the Bible? From the fields of Shinar in Genesis to the judgments of Revelation, we are not speaking only of an ancient city, but of an eternal symbol of rebellion, idolatry, and destruction. Who founded it? What truly happened at its tower that dared to defy heaven? Why did the prophets point to it with such fury? And even more unsettling, why does John in Revelation call it the mother of harlots? This is not just a historical journey. It is a spiritual journey. A portrait of how humanity dared to challenge God again and again under the same name. Babylon. Here, you will not find fiction. Every word is faithfully based on scripture. From its first mention in Genesis to its ultimate downfall in Revelation, the story of a city and of a spirit that has spanned millennia. A city raised by men, torn down by God. Babylon was real. It was powerful. An empire that rose against the people of God and became an eternal warning for all generations. Who was Nimrod, the mighty hunter? Why did he desire to build a tower that reached the heavens? How did God respond to that challenge? And why, centuries later, would Babylon be the nation that destroyed Jerusalem and carried God's people into exile? In this biblical film, you will not hear human interpretations. We will read directly what the Word says. Genesis, Kings, Chronicles, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Revelation. Prophetic and narrative thread that connects every mention of Babylon with a divine call to all humanity. We will see how God foretold its fall long before it happened. How Isaiah and Jeremiah described its destruction in detail. And how finally, in Revelation, Babylon appears as the symbol of all that is corrupt and evil, destined to be destroyed forever by God. In the days that followed the Great Flood, the world was a new canvas, fresh, silent. Rivers were still seeking their course. Forests grew upon the damp earth, and the survivors, descendants of Noah, gazed at the horizon, carrying both hope and fear. Everything they had once known was gone, and now they were called to raise a new story. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with their children, began to settle the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia. It was a rich land, nourished by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where life flourished in abundance. There, where the soil generously responded to human labor, a dream was born, a dream that soon became an obsession. To build not only houses, but a city that would defy time itself. At first, the families lived in simple tents. Each sunrise was a battle against uncertainty. They had to find food, tame animals, learn to cultivate the fields. But while some dreamed of a quiet life, others began to desire something greater. Among all the descendants, one man stood out who would mark history. Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Scripture describes him as a mighty man, a formidable hunter, but more than his physical strength, what set him apart was his ambition. Nimrod was not content with tending flocks or working the soil. He longed to establish a kingdom, to centralize power, to unite men under a single banner. For many, his bravery was inspiring. He defended the villages from wild beasts and organized expeditions to protect travelers. Yet within him burned a fiercer fire, the desire to rule over all. Thus, under his leadership, the project of a city was born on the plains of Shinar. That city would be called Babylon. Its name, according to tradition, meant the Gate of the Gods. At first, its walls were humble, built with baked bricks and mortar. But behind every stone lay a greater purpose, to consolidate a center of power, a symbol of human greatness. The elders told how, in those early days, men spoke a single language. That unity gave strength to the project, for no one felt foreign or estranged. Work went on day and night. Each family contributed. Some made bricks, others cut wood, Others transported materials. The city grew, and with it grew Nimrod's vision. Daily life in the emerging Babylon was a mosaic of toil and pride. Women ground grain and baked bread for the workers. Children, curious and playful, built small constructions of mud and wood, imitating their fathers. At dusk, campfires lit the settlements, and men spoke loudly of the future. They no longer wished to be scattered wanderers, but a united people under one king. Yet what began as a need for protection against beasts and the dangers of the land soon transformed into a desire to transcend what was human. Babylon would not be just a city. It would be the heart of the world, the place where men would grasp eternal glory. Nimrod spoke of a city that would depend on no one, not even the God who had saved Noah. His words seduced.
Let us unite, let us build, let us be remembered forever.
The air was heavy with ambition. Bonfires blazed through the night, illuminating the weary yet proud faces of those who worked without rest. Songs were heard, prayers were raised, but they were not humble prayers to God. They were praises to the strength of man, to his ability to forge with his own hands a future independent from the Creator. As time went on, Nimrod began to be seen not merely as a leader, but as a king. He sat upon an improvised throne of stone, issued commands, and received tributes. The city he had once dreamed of was no longer just a refuge. It was becoming a kingdom. From its towers, the fields were watched. From its plazas, decrees were imposed. And on its altars, sacrifices were offered not to the God of heaven, but to the forces of nature, to idols born of the human heart. Thus, Babylon took its first steps, with the promise of greatness and the seed of pride. The stage was set for the episode that would mark the history of all nations. The construction of the Tower of Babel. Babylon grew, and with it, so did the ambition of its people. Simple houses turned into temples, walls into fortresses, and Nimrod's dreams reached unimaginable heights. It was no longer merely about building a city. Now they planned to raise a monument that would defy heaven itself. Nimrod gathered the leaders of the families and proclaimed,
"Let us build a tower whose top may reach the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, so that we may not be scattered across the face of the earth."
The proposal ignited their hearts. Those men, still united by one language, felt invincible. The craftsmen drew rudimentary plans. The masons baked millions of bricks under the sun, and the hands of thousands labored in perfect coordination. The plain of Shinar resounded with the pounding of hammers, and the murmur of voices all speaking of one single dream: to reach the heavens. The tower rose in a spiral, stone upon stone, brick upon brick, and as it rose, so too did human pride. There were no prayers of gratitude to the Creator, but shouts of triumph for the strength of men. In the camps, a phrase was repeated:
"We do not need God. We will be our own gods."
The project was not only architectural, but spiritual. The tower was a symbol of autonomy, of defiance, of a humanity determined to depend on itself. It was not built as a tribute to eternity, but as a cry of independence. That tower was not a bridge to heaven, it was a wall against God. Days turned into months, months into years, and the tower reached heights that cast shadows over the surrounding fields and villages. Travelers who passed by stood in awe.
Here is the heart of the world, the work that will lead us to immortality.
But amid that euphoria, a silent danger grew. Pride. The unity of men was not guided by obedience to God, but by the thirst for greatness. And when unity turns into arrogance, the end inevitably draws near. The sacred account tells us that God descended to observe the city and the tower, and he said,
"Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. They have begun this work, and nothing will restrain them from what they have purposed to do. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech."
One morning, as the builders placed bricks on the upper levels, the unthinkable happened. The foreman shouted instructions, but the workers did not understand. Where once there had been clarity, now confusion reigned. Some spoke strange words, others replied with useless gestures.
You must bring more stone. No, the wood. We need more wood.
The murmur of voices that had once been a melody turned into a chaos of unknown tongues. Disorder broke out at once. Some accused others of betrayal, others whispered of conspiracies. Work crews stopped their labor, arguments multiplied, and what had once been a common dream became an unfinished tower. The unity that had given strength to the project shattered into 1,000 pieces. That day, the city erupted in conflict. Whole families, unable to communicate with their neighbors, began to separate from one another. Some journeyed north, others south. Still others followed the rivers, seeking distant lands. Those who shared the same language gathered together, and thus the nations were born. The tower, left half-built, stood as a monument to frustrated pride. Its bricks wore down over time, and what had begun as the Gate of the Gods became instead the symbol of confusion. From then on, that place was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. Nimrod's dream of uniting the world under his rule ended in dispersion. What was meant to be a stairway to glory became ruins, and what was intended as an eternal monument crumbled into dust. The lesson was engraved in history. No empire raised on pride can stand. Babylon was born with a seal of greatness, but also with a mark of judgment. The echo of that tower would resound through the ages, reminding mankind that arrogance always leads to downfall. The echo of the Tower of Babel was etched into the memory of generations. Though many people scattered toward distant mountains and plains, the city of Babylon remained standing. Its walls, though incomplete, rose as witnesses of a past marked by arrogance and as foundations for an even more ambitious future. As the centuries passed, Babylon once again filled with life. New generations, speaking new tongues, settled in its plazas and streets. The memory of divine judgment slowly faded, and the city began to transform into a center of exchange. Caravans arrived along its roads laden with spices, metals, textiles, and livestock. From the east came precious gems, from the west, wines and oils, from the north, timbers, and from the south, fertile wheat. Babylon was the crossroads of the world, a bridge between cultures and distant lands. The markets were a spectacle in themselves. Perfumes mingled with the scent of roasted meats, the clinking of metals with the cries of merchants. Artisans carved stone and wood, goldsmiths melted gold and silver, and weavers displayed fabrics in vivid colors. Children darted between stalls while scribes recorded every transaction on clay tablets. Babylon was a hive of life, a place where each day seemed to bring a new discovery. But it was not commerce alone that exalted the city. The sciences also flourished. The Babylonians gazed upon the heavens with fascination. Their clear nights were born the first records of stars and lunar cycles. They believed the celestial bodies carried the messages of the gods, and that every movement in the sky foretold destiny and fortune. On clay tablets they left writings that would be studied for millennia. Mathematical calculations, astronomical predictions, systems of measure and weight. Their knowledge was so advanced that many nations regarded them as sages who touched the mysteries of heaven. Religion lay at the heart of their life. Temples were erected to gods such as Marduk, the chief deity, Ishtar, goddess of war and love, and Enlil, lord of the skies. The priests were seen as guardians of wisdom, interpreters of the stars, and mediators between men and divinities. Their ceremonies were magnificent. Processions with banners, animal sacrifices, and chants that echoed throughout the valley. Babylon was not only a place of commerce, but also a sanctuary of spiritual power, though that power was estranged from the true God. Social organization reflected that grandeur. At the summit stood the king, whose authority was considered sacred. He was no longer merely a ruler. He was viewed as the representative of the gods on earth. His word was law, and his image rose in statues of bronze and stone. Beneath him were the priests and nobles, who controlled the temples, the lands, and trade. Below them came the scribes, artisans, and merchants, the driving force of wealth. At the base were peasants and slaves, whose labor sustained the magnificence of the city. Everyone had their place, and all, in one way or another, served the exaltation of Babylon. In time, the city extended its influence beyond its walls. Armed groups, under the king's orders, explored and subdued nearby territories. It was not yet the great empire it would later become, but neighboring peoples already felt the weight of Babylon. Some came willingly to its markets to trade, drawn by its abundance. Others, however, feared that this powerful city would eventually subjugate them. Travelers arriving from distant lands were left astonished.
Never have we seen a city more wealthy, more imposing, more proud.
They said. Their reports spread like fire. Babylon was the heart of the world, the jewel of the valley, the city where wealth seemed without end. But within that splendor beat a contrast. While some praised the greatness of Babylon, others saw it as a threat. Behind the abundance, in the science lay the arrogance of a people who glorified themselves. It was a place where idols replaced God, where commerce turned into greed, and where unity was forged, not in humility, but in power. Babylon became a symbol. For some, it was the promise of progress and wealth. For others, it was the city that defied the eternal. And though its splendor was only beginning, it already carried within itself the seed of its destiny. The glory that fascinates, and the pride that condemns. The splendor of Babylon grew like a river that, instead of quenching, flooded everything in its path. No longer was it merely a city of commerce and religion. It was beginning to turn into an empire. Mighty kings organized disciplined armies, forged in iron and fire, that spread like a shadow over neighboring peoples. Each campaign was a display of force, each victory a proclamation that Babylon would not settle for being a center of exchange. It aspired to rule the world. The city's walls rose proudly, and its gates, adorned with carvings of bulls and lions, seemed to declare to every visitor, "Here lies the greatness of mankind." In its plazas, caravans arrived from the ends of the earth, but alongside them marched war captives as well. Babylon did not only trade in goods, it traded in men, women, and entire nations. It was in this setting that one of the most remembered kings in history emerged, Nebuchadnezzar II. A strategist, builder, and conqueror, he became the strongest arm of Babylon. His name would soon be heard in every corner of Asia Minor and beyond. Under his command, the empire reached an expansion that seemed unstoppable. Before marching against Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar led campaigns against Assyria, Egypt, and Phoenicia. Each victory increased his prestige and spread fear among his enemies. Chronicles tell that his armies marched like a storm, disciplined, relentless, and well-supplied. Wherever his banner appeared, surrender was the only choice for many peoples. It was during his reign that the Babylonian hosts set their sights on Judah, the small kingdom of David's descendants. Jerusalem, with its walls and its temple, seemed invulnerable, but the roar of Babylon was too strong. The armies besieged the city, closed its gates, and cut off its provisions. Day by day, hunger and fear broke its inhabitants. Mothers could not feed their children, the elderly wasted away in silence, and the priests begged for help that never came. At last, Jerusalem fell under the weight of iron and fire. The temple, pride of the people of Israel, was plundered and burned. Its sacred treasures were carried off to Babylon as spoils of war. The gates that had been a symbol of faith burned to ashes, and the smoke rose like a lament that seemed to reach the heavens. The nobles and wise men of Judah were chained and forced to march into exile. Among them were young men who would later become protagonists of great stories: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. On the banks of the Euphrates, they began a new life as servants in a foreign court, far from their land and their temple. The exile of Israel marked a before and after. For the Babylonians, it was another victory, another nation subdued. For the Jews, it was a wound that would never fully heal.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. When we remembered Zion,
says the psalm, the greatness of the city was, for them, a golden prison. When the captives arrived in Babylon, they were both astonished and overwhelmed. Before their eyes rose gigantic walls, gates decorated with dragons and bulls, temples that seemed to touch the heavens. All of it stood in stark contrast to the ruined Jerusalem. There, in the midst of foreign splendor, they grasped the magnitude of their defeat. Meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar reveled in his glory. He ordered great constructions, expanded the walls, and reinforced the defenses. Under his reign, Babylon was not only a military empire, it was a spectacle of power and beauty. Conquered peoples contributed tributes, artisans, and knowledge. Everything served to magnify the city, but the brilliance had a dark side. The king's arrogance made him believe himself invincible. He walked through the gardens and palaces and proclaimed,
"Is this not the great Babylon that I have built with the strength of my power and for the glory of my majesty?"
Words that revealed the very essence of his reign, a power built upon human pride. The world watched in awe and fear. Babylon was no longer just a center of trade. It was an empire that could crush anyone who opposed it. The fall of Jerusalem and the exile of Israel's people were proof of that. Yet what seemed like an eternal triumph was, in reality, the prelude to new lessons that would mark kings and nations. Under Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Babylon reached a splendor that seemed unmatched. Its walls were so wide that it was said 4 horses could race side by side upon them. Its gates, covered in blue glazed tiles and adorned with figures of bulls and dragons, impressed every traveler who approached. And among its wonders rose a marvel that would be remembered for centuries: the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. According to tradition, Nebuchadnezzar ordered them built for his wife, who longed for the green mountains of her homeland. In the midst of the Mesopotamian plain, tiered terraces were raised, covered with trees, flowers, and cascading waters that seemed to defy gravity. From afar, the gardens appeared as a living mountain in the heart of the city. They were the perfect symbol of human power, to transform nature and bend it to the king's will. Babylonian engineers devised a revolutionary irrigation system. Using pulleys, water wheels, and hidden channels, they lifted water from the Euphrates River up to the highest terraces. Palms, rose bushes, fig trees, and cypresses were nourished, creating a landscape that seemed torn from Eden itself. Travelers arriving from distant lands were left in awe. "Never have we seen such a garden, suspended between heaven and earth," they said.
Never have we seen such a garden, suspended between heaven and earth.
The Babylonians took pride in their city, and with reason. No other place in the world gathered so much wealth, science, and beauty. Yet within that pride also pulsed the seed of arrogance. Nebuchadnezzar was not only a feared conqueror, he was also a visionary builder. During his reign, Babylon reached an architectural and cultural splendor without precedent. He ordered the city walls to be reinforced until they became one of the greatest defenses of the ancient world, so wide, it was said, that chariots could race upon them. He built temples to honor his gods and expanded the royal palaces, decorating them with vivid mosaics. Among his most celebrated works was the imposing Ishtar Gate, covered in deep blue glazed bricks and adorned with dragons, bulls, and lions in relief. This gate became a symbol of power and welcome, reminding every visitor that Babylon was the jewel of the world. Not satisfied with being called the head of gold in the dream of the statue, Nebuchadnezzar decided to raise up his own glory. He commanded a colossal statue of gold about 30 meters high to be erected in the plain of Dura. He summoned princes, governors, judges, and peoples of all nations under his rule. The decree was clear. At the sound of music, all were to bow down and worship the statue. Whoever refused would be thrown into the blazing furnace. Among the crowd were 3 young Hebrews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused to bow. Accused before the king, they were brought into his presence. Nebuchadnezzar gave them one last chance, but they answered firmly,
"Our God is able to deliver us from the furnace. But even if he does not, we will not serve your gods, nor worship your statue."
The king's fury was ignited. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The 3 young men were thrown in, and the flames were so intense that they consumed the soldiers who cast them. But when Nebuchadnezzar looked inside, he was astonished. There were not 3 men walking in the fire, but 4, and the 4th had a divine appearance. He called them out. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego emerged unharmed. Not a single hair was singed, nor was there even the smell of fire on their garments. Then the king proclaimed,
"Blessed be their God, who sent his angel and delivered them. No other God can save in this way."
Once more, the sovereign of Babylon acknowledged the power of the Most High. Yet the seed of pride continued to beat in his heart. Nebuchadnezzar was a mighty king, but also a restless man. In the depths of his nights, he was assaulted by dreams that filled him with fear. One of them was particularly disturbing. He saw a great statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet mixed with iron and clay. Suddenly, a stone cut without human hands struck the statue at its feet, and the entire image collapsed into dust, while the stone became a mountain that filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar awoke in turmoil. He summoned his wise men, magicians, enchanters, and astrologers. He demanded not only the interpretation, but that they reveal the very dream itself. The wise men were thrown into despair. No man can do this. Only the gods could reveal it. The king, enraged, ordered the execution of all the counselors who failed to meet his command. The entire court trembled before his wrath. Then Daniel appeared, one of the young Hebrews taken into exile. With humility, he asked for time and prayed to the God of heaven. That very night, the mystery was revealed to him in a vision. The next day, he was brought before the king. With respect, he declared,
"No wise man, astrologer, or magician can reveal the secret the king demands. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown the king what will take place in the days to come. You are that head of gold. After you, other kingdoms will arise, one of silver, another of bronze, another of iron, and finally a divided kingdom, both strong and fragile. But in the end, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, and it will consume all the others."
The king was astonished. Within him burned the pride of being the head of gold, but also the fear that his kingdom would not last forever. He fell before Daniel, acknowledging the greatness of the God who had revealed the mystery, and exalted him above the wise men of Babylon. Yet, with time, arrogance returned to his heart. Babylon was so majestic that it seemed eternal. Its gardens, temples, and walls stood as testimony to its power. Still, the dream had planted a seed of doubt. The most glorious empire could crumble in a moment. Sometime later, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. This time, he saw a massive tree in the midst of the earth. Its top reached the heavens, and its branches gave shade to the nations. Animals found shelter beneath it, and birds nested in its branches. But suddenly, a messenger from heaven descended and proclaimed,
Cut down the tree, leave only the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, to remain in the field. Let his heart be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him.
None of the wise men could interpret the dream. Once again, Daniel was summoned before the king. With a troubled face, he explained,
O king, the tree is you. You have grown and become strong, and your greatness has reached to the heavens, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. But because you have exalted yourself, God has decreed that you will be driven from among men, you will dwell with the beasts of the field, and you will eat grass like oxen. 7 years will pass until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whomever he wills.
Daniel pleaded with the king to repent and practice justice, that his punishment might be averted. But Nebuchadnezzar did not listen. 12 months later, as he walked through his palace, gazing upon the greatness of his city, he cried out in arrogance,
Is this not the great Babylon that I have built by the strength of my power, and for the glory of my majesty?
He had not yet finished speaking when a voice from heaven thundered,
Your kingdom has been taken from you. You shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field.
At that very moment, the king's mind was broken. He lost his reason and fled from men. He lived in the fields like a beast. His body was drenched with dew. His hair grew like eagle's feathers, and his nails like the claws of a bird. The most powerful man on earth had been reduced to an animal, fulfilling the word of the Most High. The years of humiliation passed.
Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and glorify the King of heaven, because all his works are true and his ways are just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride.
Thus ended the life of the great king, not as the invincible conqueror who built palaces and gardens, but as a broken man who learned that true greatness is not found in human kingdoms, but in recognizing the sovereignty of the eternal God. According to the Bible, especially in the book of Daniel, the story of Nebuchadnezzar concludes with his recovery of understanding and his acknowledgement of God. After that, the text gives no further details about his life or the exact moment of his death. Historical records and Babylonian chronicles confirm that Nebuchadnezzar II died around 562 B, after more than 40 years of reign. After Nebuchadnezzar's death, Babylon entered a time of instability. The throne that had once been the center of world power quickly passed from hand to hand. His son, evil Merodach, reigned briefly before being deposed. Then came other rulers, each weaker than the one before. The splendor Nebuchadnezzar had built began to crack. Though palaces and walls still stood, the empire's glory was fading from within. Court intrigues, conspiracies, and assassinations marked the years that followed. Finally, power came to Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, who ruled as co-regent alongside his father Nabonidus. But unlike the great builder king, Belshazzar did not seek to strengthen the empire, nor to honor the God who had humbled his grandfather. He preferred luxury, feasting, and arrogance. Under his reign, Babylon was no longer invincible. Outwardly, it still appeared majestic, but inwardly, it was rotting away. One night, Belshazzar held a great banquet in his palace. He invited 1,000 of his princes, nobles, and concubines. The halls shone with golden lamps. The tables overflowed with meats, exotic fruits, and wines brought from distant lands. The music of harps and flutes filled the air as dancers entertained the guests. The king, drunk with wine and pride, sought to show that his power was eternal, that Babylon was impregnable. In the midst of his drunkenness, Belshazzar committed an act that would seal his fate. He ordered the sacred vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought forth. Those utensils had been consecrated to the God of Israel, but now they were placed into profane hands. The guests drank wine from them while praising the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. It was the height of arrogance, to take what was holy and turn it into mockery. Suddenly, in the midst of the celebration, the unthinkable happened. A mysterious hand appeared on the palace wall and began to write strange words. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. The music stopped, the laughter ceased. The king's face turned pale, his knees knocked together, and his heart was filled with terror. The wise men were summoned at once to read the writing, but none could interpret it. The princes looked at one another in confusion. The musicians were silent, and the cups lay forgotten upon the tables. Fear grew like a shadow over the hall. Then the Queen Mother, recalling the days of Nebuchadnezzar, spoke the name of Daniel, the Hebrew exile who had revealed mysteries in the past. Daniel was brought before the king. Belshazzar, desperate, promised to clothe him in purple, to place a gold chain around his neck, and to make him the third ruler of the kingdom if he could interpret the inscription. But Daniel, with firmness and without fear, replied that he sought no human rewards. Before revealing the mystery, he reminded the king of his predecessor's story.
O king, the Most High gave Nebuchadnezzar greatness, glory, and majesty. But when his heart was lifted up, he was humbled, until he acknowledged that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whomever he wills. You, Belshazzar, knowing all this, have not humbled your heart. Instead, you have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven. You have profaned the vessels of his temple, and you have given praise to gods that neither see nor hear, but the God in whose hand is your very breath you have not honored.
Silence gripped the hall.
Many. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Paris. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians.
Belshazzar, in a futile gesture, fulfilled his promise and clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain on his neck, and proclaimed him third ruler of the kingdom. But those honors were empty, for the sentence had already been sealed. That very night, while the Babylonians feasted within their walls, the army of the Medes and Persians, under Cyrus the Great, carried out a daring strategy. They diverted the course of the Euphrates River, causing its waters to recede from the channel that ran through the city. When the riverbed was dry, the soldiers entered silently beneath the walls, finding the gates along the river neglected and left open. The city that had seemed impregnable was taken without great resistance. The roar of the Persians echoed through the streets. The sentinels fell in surprise, and within hours the great Babylon, once thought eternal, was in foreign hands. That same night, Belshazzar was slain, and the kingdom was given to the Medes and Persians, fulfilling the prophecy Daniel had declared. The fall of Babylon was etched into history as a warning. No matter how high the walls, nor how splendid the palaces, when pride rises against the eternal, ruin inevitably follows. Thus ended the city that had defied God from its very foundations, delivered in a single night of feasting, arrogance, and judgment. The fall of Babylon to the Medes and Persians did not mean the end of its influence. Though its walls were torn down and its kings humbled, the city's name continued to echo through history as a synonym for greatness and pride. Babylon ceased to be a political capital, but it became an eternal symbol that transcended the centuries. The prophets of Israel did not forget what had taken place. Centuries earlier, Isaiah had declared,
Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah, overthrown by God. Never again will it be inhabited. No one will live in it from generation to generation.
Jeremiah too proclaimed its judgment, foretelling that its rivers would dry up and its palaces would lie desolate. The city's fall was seen as the fulfillment of those words, but also as a warning to every empire that would follow the same path of pride. For the Jews in exile, Babylon represented more than a political enemy. It was the city that had torn them from their land, the place where they wept by the rivers, remembering Zion. Yet it was also the stage where the faithfulness of men like Daniel shone, men who, amid foreign opulence, remained steadfast in their devotion. Thus, Babylon was engraved in Israel's memory, both as a symbol of oppression and as a battlefield where faith triumphed over worldly arrogance. As centuries passed, Babylon ceased to be a mighty kingdom and became ruins. Greek travelers such as Herodotus wrote of the immensity of its walls and temples, but even in his day many of its structures had already decayed. Later explorers found fallen towers, temples buried in sand, and roads overgrown with weeds. What had once been the pride of the world had become a lair of jackals and a refuge for bandits. The silence of the ruins seemed to cry out that human empires are not eternal. Yet, Babylon did not disappear from the biblical record. In Revelation, written centuries later, it reappears not as a physical city, but as a spiritual symbol. There it is described as the Great Harlot, the mother of earth's abominations, clothed in purple and scarlet, drunk with the blood of the saints. Her final fall is announced with a mighty voice. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every impure spirit. The vision is staggering. The merchants of the earth mourn her destruction, crying, "Woe, woe to the great city, clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones and pearls. For in a single hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin." Just as ancient traders depended on Babylon, Revelation presents her as the center of a corrupt network that seduces kings and nations with her splendor, but is ultimately judged for her pride. This image transcended ancient history. Babylon ceased to be a mere geographic place and became an archetype of evil. The exaltation of the human over the divine, idolatry disguised as wealth, corruption that ensnares the nations. Every time an empire rose in arrogance, prophets and believers said it bore within itself the spirit of Babylon. Rome, centuries later, was described in the same terms. And even in modern times, the name Babylon is still used to point to the moral and spiritual decay of societies that glorify themselves. Its legacy, then, is not only in its ruins nor in the wonders it once built, but in the lesson it left for generations. All human power is fragile before divine judgment. The hanging gardens, the walls, the temples were reduced to dust. Yet its story lives on in scripture and in the memory of nations as both warning and example. Thus, Babylon lives on as a memory and a symbol, a city that sought to be eternal but ended in ruins, still speaking today of the fragility of empires when they rise in pride against the eternal. The story of Babylon is not merely a tale of the past. It is a warning, a mirror, and a lesson for every generation. It reminds us that greatness without humility leads to ruin, and that all human power is fragile before the judgment of the eternal. If this story has touched you, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and join us in the upcoming narratives where history and faith intertwine to reveal lessons still alive today. May God bless you and be with you always. Amen.